Today is State Senator Angela Williams, chair of the Black Democratic Legislative Caucus. And thank you so much for being here today. We're delighted to have you here today. Now, you have said the caucus will address issues the African American community and communities of color are facing during these trying times of uncertainty. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is our caucus has given a lot of thought on the issues that are relevant to African American communities and communities of color. And we have decided that the areas of education and housing and criminal justice and business and healthcare are the areas that we want to focus on, because that's where we found some of the greatest needs in our communities. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read the Losing Ground report that was put out a couple of years ago by PBS, but there's still some inequities and there's still needs in those areas, and we've decided that will be our legislative agenda moving forward in 2018.
And how is it that you prioritize those topics? What is it about those?
What it is about those is that there is just continued inequities in areas. When you look at even education, we're looking at funding. We have schools in our state that don't necessarily get the level of funding that we think is there. You know, where you live by your zip code may determine the amount of funding. We need to ensure that we're looking at testing, we're looking at the SPF and how that affects choice for communities of color. When you look at healthcare disparities, you know, issues in communities of color from health and access to healthcare. When you look at health issues like high blood pressure, diabetes, we want to make sure that communities of color and African Americans have access to adequate healthcare.
We know that when the governor gave his State of the State, the Speaker, the Senate President, transportation was really pretty much #1 on their list, but that's not on your list. Is there a reason?
You know, that's an issue that we'll all be dealing with. When you look at the high-level issues that were mentioned in the State of the State and by the Speaker and the Minority Leader and the President, you look at transportation, we look at health care, we look at broadband, we're going to have to deal with opioids, and we'll have to be dealing with those types of issues. We'll address those, but we're honing down on those issues that affect the day-to-day lives of African Americans and communities of color.
I know one of the issues of particular interest is criminal justice, and one of them would update the hazing statute. Explain that.
If you look at Colorado's hazing statute, it hasn't been updated since 1999. And we know that if you look across the country where there are initiations into fraternities and sororities across the country, and you may be very well of the incident that occurred of the young man on the East Coast where he was left in the basement but for 3 days before 911 was called. So it triggered an idea to me. It said, I better go check the statute. And our statute has not been updated since 1999, and it only covers physical harm. And there can be terms of hazing when it comes to emotional and psychological, so we're going to update the statute to that. It also does not cover if an adult is being initiated into some type of organization at a property off-site from a college or a university. So I just think it's a good protection for the people of Colorado and anyone being initiated into an organization to update that statute.
I think another issue that you have on your list is disclosing the location of out-of-state inmates. Why that one?
That is an initiative that Senator Rhonda Fields is championing for us. And Senator Fields feels like this is important to the state of Colorado, and how do we look at the inmates, what's going on in our criminal justice system, working with the Department of Corrections. She's our champion, and we're looking forward to supporting her on that.
And I know of particular interest to you is an issue regarding rent, and one bill that you were suggesting proposing would give renters more time to make good on late rent.
Yes, that is the right to cure piece of legislation that we're working on, working with Representative Dominique Jackson in the House on that. And what we want to be able to do, this is a time in which wages are stagnant and demands for housing is high. We know that there's a lot of consumers out there, constituents that may be kicked out of their homes. And I think this is a good bill for, it's pro-consumer. We have people who are living from paycheck to paycheck. So what if someone has a loss? Maybe it's a medical loss for $1,000, maybe their car is in repair, they can't get back and forth to work. And I think it's reasonable that we give some of the tenants a greater time, and we're asking for 14 days at the notice if they're late in order to pay that off. I think that's reasonable, and it's the right human thing to do.
Before we let you go, I know one of your members, Javon Melton, has said that you all want to make sure that African Americans are not ignored and that their vote is not taken for granted. Is that really what's at issue here for your caucus?
That is in addition to our legislative agenda. We feel as though there are times when candidates come to the African American community and they may, approach Representative Melton. They may approach one person or a leader in the African American community, and our votes count. We want to make sure that the African American community is involved, but more so that they're educated on the issues and what those candidates represent, and that they will be able to address the issues that are important to communities of color and the African American community.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Williams, for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you.